We're here with Mukesh Kumar, who is the Chief Executive Officer at FDA MAP, and he is a veteran of the FDA-regulated industry. He's a serial entrepreneur. Mukesh has developed numerous drugs, biological products, medical devices, and other products used worldwide for the treatment, management, diagnosis, and prevention of diseases. His website is fdamap.com. Dr. Mukesh, glad to be speaking with you.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Robert. Thank you for the nice introduction. Hopefully, let's see what I can answer for you. I'm looking for that.
I'm looking forward to it too. We have set the bar high, but that is fine because we will deliver. And so what is your current passion and focus? What has you really excited these days?
Well, I think the main passion is clinical trials, running clinical trials and having more minorities and more underrepresented people participate in clinical trials. I think that's the passion. I've been doing clinical trials for 20 plus years, and one thing that I've seen repeatedly is that most clinical trials lack underrepresented people. We lack economically challenged people. We lack different ethnicities. We don't have a lot of clinical data from people who end up using these products a lot. So my passion for the last few years have been to encourage people of different communities to take advantage of clinical trials. An advantage because clinical trials do offer many incentives that are not available otherwise. And people don't get advantage of them just because they don't know about it or they have some misperceptions about it. So my passion has been to educate people about it, and also to apply those things. I run a clinical research company, which means I am in charge of how these trials will be run. And when I run those trials, I try to do my best to get more participation from people who generally do not participate in trials.
Wonderful. Well, let's raise some awareness about clinical trials and what they are and what they do and how we can access them. And just as a layperson, I feel like in recent years, I've heard some of this news about this lack of diversity you mentioned, how many times the default is white male and there's not a lot of always focus on women or on minorities. And so can you explain that really quickly? Because I feel like I hear some of these like rumors, but I'm not really sure where they come from and what they are. And what's this lack of diversity in clinical trials?
So what it means is that if you look at any of the drugs approved in the last 20 years by FDA, and you look at the clinical trial data that was the basis for approval of those products, you'll find more than 70-80% of the data come from Caucasians, from white males and females. I would say for females, we have come a long way. We have a significant increase in the participation of females, but we are still very lopsidedly represented by white Caucasian population. You don't see a proportional representation from African Americans, from Latinos, from Asian populations, and which actually leads to products getting approved based on data from primarily Caucasians. And we know scientifically that there are differences, how different ethnicities react to the same diseases, same drugs. So these is a lot of the disease symptoms are dependent on ethnicities, and so is the response of the drugs. And if you've never tested it in those populations, you have no clue what would happen when this drug would be used in those populations. So you end up having drugs which are not as effective, or drugs which have side effects which are not acceptable. The only way to address it is by including more people from that community, so you have better data from that community. So that is why FDA has been talking about it. There are a lot of public interest groups, public policy groups talking about it, because it's a crisis of a kind, because we have diseases that happen a lot in African American populations, but the drugs are never tested on those populations, and those drugs don't work as well. So we have been trying to address it. There are a lot of initiatives from the US FDA, from the US government, from several nonprofit organizations, academic centers, but still there's a lot of work to be done.
Wonderful. Well, then let's get that work done. And then so when you mention clinical trials, this is a concept that I feel like I'm supposed to know what. I feel like I failed the test, because it's like clinical trials, it seems like something that we should know what it is. But if we don't know what it is, like what is it and what sort of uses does it have? And you say that there should be more people participating, and how would someone participate if there was a clinical trial right for them?
So clinical trials are experiment done in people. to see if a drug is good or not. So before, see, when you buy a medicine from a pharmacist, you want it to work on you. If you have headache, you take a headache pill, you expect the headache pill to take care of your headache, right? You would not want to take a pill that you don't know if it works or doesn't work. And you would not want to take a pill that could maybe cause you something else that's even worse than headache. So clinical trials are how we test that. Before we had clinical trials, and we've been doing clinical trials for more than 100 years. And before there were clinical trials, there were a lot of anecdotal treatments that were sold. We literally used to buy snake oil and cocaine for treating diseases. I mean, people find it surprising. It's not a cliche. There were products that actually had snake venom and cocaine that were intended to treat diseases without any evidence. And many a times people would get more sick from the drug than they would from the disease. And, we learned our lessons and we said, okay, that's not good. We should test the drugs before we give it to somebody who's sick. Before you give somebody a drug, you want to have certain confidence in the drug that you take. So clinical trials do that. Clinical trials, you take this, you do it in a very, very controlled environment. So you make sure the people taking it, people participating in this experiment are taken care of. They're properly selected. First of all, we want to minimize any kind of side effect in them. So we want to select them properly. And then we want to really, really pay very close attention to their health when they take this drug. So think about it. When you go to a doctor for any treatment, you're lucky if the doctor spends 5 minutes with you. On a clinical trial, a doctor is required to spend hours with you. So the amount of attention that you get and the amount of testing that they do on you and the amount of supervision and attention you get in a clinical trial is about 20 to 30 times more than what you would get in an average care. So you do this experiment in a highly controlled environment. It tells you how the drug works. And if the drug works, only then the drug is allowed to be sold. So if the drug doesn't work, you get rejection. You will not be allowed to sell this drug. So there is a process. When you want to drive a car, you're a teenager, you want to drive a car. You need to go to driving school, need to learn the laws, and need to pass a test before you can get a license, right? We made that rule. You would not want any 10-year-old or 15-year-old driving a car and not knowing anything about the car, not knowing any of the rules, because then what you would have? You would have accidents. You will have people getting killed on the road. And it used to happen before we had licenses. People used to die on the road because somebody didn't know how to drive a car, was driving a car. So same thing applies to when you want to sell something. The license to sell is given by the FDA in our country. And the license is based on you knowing all the rules and you showing to FDA that your product is good. So clinical trials, without clinical trials, you cannot get a new product in the US market at all. And that's the law. And the law is based on this very simple logic. We want to know if it works and if it is safe before we allow you to sell it to everybody and make a lot of money off it.
That is reassuring that there is this process that's gone through just to make sure that the drug works and is safe and is tested in such a thorough way. And then, so what sorts of clinical trials are done? I'm sure all kinds, but can you tell us some examples and maybe get our heads wrapped around what sort of things are tested?
Well, pretty much everything. Anything that is used to treat, diagnose, or prevent a disease is tested in clinical trials. So you don't do clinical trials with food, for example, or you don't do clinical trials with cosmetics or with dietary supplements. These are food products, so you don't need to do experiments with food. But if it is supposed to treat a disease or prevent a disease like a vaccine, or treat a disease like a drug, or maybe diagnose a disease like a new test, blood test, those things all need to be tested in clinical trials before they can be sold.
Are there any clinical trials that you've done that come to mind that really excite you or that you think are particularly interesting?
But actually, that's what I do for a living. So I come across a lot of very interesting products. I've worked in more than 200 of them over the last 20 years. So many of them, but the one we are working on right now, which I'm very, very, very passionate about, is this product for septic shock. Septic shock is responsible for 9 out of 10 deaths in hospitals. When people get hospitalized, they have infection and the infection becomes septic and this sepsis grows and you have toxins in your body. And 9 out of 10 times, if you are not controlled, if your sepsis doesn't get controlled, you die. So if you go to hospitals and you look at people who die in hospitals, 9 out of 10 died of septic shock. It's a crazy disease. He's a scientist, actually an African American scientist, who developed a treatment for sepsis and septic shock. And we did a treatment, we did a trial with this. It's a small trial. And in that trial, we saw every single person who had septic shock who got this treatment responded positively to this treatment. These are people who, according to medical knowledge, had more than 70 to 80% chance of dying. Okay, so we had about 70% of those people did not die. They survived, which is amazing, which is out of this world. I've worked in a lot of products. I've not seen product with that kind of response. It's amazing response. Now we're doing a larger phase 3 clinical trial. We went to FDA. They were very excited about the product. So it's very recent. We just finished this trial and we are starting a phase 3 trial. So yeah, I'm very enthusiastic about it because, it's a disease that can happen to people young and old, people of all races. A lot of people, end up in hospitals because they don't treat their infection in time and it becomes septic and they end up in ICUs. So it's very expensive. If you don't have insurance, you'll probably die because hospitals will not take you. It requires ICU admissions could cause hundreds of thousands of dollars per patient. We're talking of billions of dollars of money spent every year on treating these patients, and many of them in futility. I mean, they end up in hospitals, spend sometimes weeks in hospital, and then die. Very debilitating disease. So, having something that works is very, very important for everybody, and I'm glad to be a part of it. And this is something we're just in the middle of.
Wonderful. And saving who knows how many lives once this gets rolling. That must make you feel really good. And so in all of your journey, in your clinical trials, in your medical career, in your business career, I'm sure you've had some setbacks and failures because we all have. So what do you feel like sharing just about your past struggles? What comes to mind?
Science is challenging. Products fail for all number of reasons, and you always, feel bad when something doesn't work as you thought it would in animals. There are a lot of cancer products I've worked with that, I was working with this brain cancer product a few years back, showed amazing work, amazing promise in animals. And we did a small trial in people, and despite all the best efforts, it didn't work as well as we thought it would in people. So very disappointing. We were working in wound care, in chronic wound care. I've worked in several wound care products. These are people with diabetic foot ulcers or people with all kinds of bed sores and other diseases. Older people who, these wounds are pretty bad, and, it could lead to amputations. They get so bad. And, I've worked in many of them, and a lot of products don't work. I'm working on one product right now that is showing some promise, but it's still early to say. So, there are some diseases which are hard to treat. I work with diseases. I did a lot of work in autism. It's a disease that affects at a very young age, and if not treated, these people end up having neurodevelopmental disorders, lifelong developmental disorders, and there are no treatments for it. And there was a big program done by a big university here in the US, which showed some promise, but it never really got picked up by anybody. So I'm actually working with a company that is now trying to pick up the research and develop a treatment for autism. So, the field of clinical research is riddled with failures. About 8 out of 10 products do not work as well as they would in experiments. So it is a challenge, but it's something you need to keep doing. You cannot quit. You have to keep trying. And we have our successes, a few successes here and there that we treasure, but we do have a lot of failures. It's a very challenging field. It's a very expensive experiment, and it fails a lot of times because human biology is still, we still need to learn a lot. We don't know everything about it.
It's interesting to think of it in that way, in that science especially is mostly failures, and most things are a disappointment or don't go the way that you want, but you continue on in order to get to some of those successes. And it reminded me of something else that I heard maybe a year or two ago, which is that they say that medical science has in the past 20 years especially has like progressed so much in so many different ways, but we don't necessarily see it. But in all like cancer sorts of treatment and all in like the big data sort of studies. And is that something that you can explain or speak to just in the past like 20 years or so? They say that medical science has really improved by a huge amount.
Actually, it is true. Medical science has improved by a huge amount. If you think about 100 years ago, our average lifespan was around 50 years. We were lucky if you lived to your 60th birthday. Okay, now it is 78 years. Okay, about 20 years ago, if you had HIV, it was like a death sentence. You would die. In 90s, if you develop HIV, before we had COVID, we had HIV epidemic. If you got infected with AIDS, you were dead. Okay, now you can live. You can live a very healthy and very fruitful life, like a normal life with those treatments. Cancer used to be a death sentence 20 years ago. We have come a long way. Look at the latest evidence, COVID. It was killing millions of people, thousands of people every day. And within a year, we were able to turn it back. We were able to find a vaccine that worked 97% effective. We were able to control it. We were able to shut down the pandemic in 2 years' time. These are all medical wonders. I mean, you talk about cardiac disease, talk about cholesterol, talk about obesity. Now we have a drug that can cure, that can help you lose weight, lose healthy weight without losing. If you have debilitating obesity, you could be treated, with the drugs right now. These are all medical wonders. We have, and we are doing medical wonders every day. You have treatment for cancer that work amazingly. You have CRISPR, you have CAR T therapy that treats leukemia, treats like diseases that we never thought we could treat. You have stem cell therapies, you have gene therapies, you have a lot of thousands of drugs that are available. So you cannot but wonder at the amazing science that has been done. Last 20 years are talked about more because it's more talked about now. We know more about it. There's more information about these warriors, these disease warriors who across the globe who fight diseases on a daily basis despite failing multiple times. They keep fighting, they keep trying, and you have these wonders of medicine. So, it's not fair to say that science has not developed. Science actually has come a long way. And we can as long as there are people, there will be diseases. Because diseases also evolve with you, and you have more complex diseases. We also have treatments. We are able to develop treatments pretty fast. I think anybody who thinks about science should look at just last 2 years, COVID. We treated a disease that was so severe that people would go to the hospital and die. We had so many deaths, and we saw it. It's not that long ago, just 2 years' time. If somebody had COVID and got to a hospital, the chance of them coming out of the hospital were very low. And all ages, young, old, doesn't matter. What race, doesn't matter. What sex, doesn't matter. We were able to reverse it. So, should give credit to science, to clinical trial researchers, to developers, to scientists who work tirelessly. COVID vaccine is based on 25 plus years of research. The inventor of COVID vaccine got Nobel Prize this year, but she was rejected multiple times. She even lost her job. She was fired from her job at Penn State because they felt her science was not going to go anywhere. She actually ended up working for a company in Germany that ended up developing the vaccine. So, she still persisted. She persisted and persisted and persisted for 20 plus years. And then finally we got this vaccine. So it's very challenging. And, I respect the people I work with immensely because I know they are working in a field where they know we start an experiment knowing that 8 out of 10 times we are going to fail, but we still do the experiment. That you have to give credit to that.
That is motivating. And if those of us who think that we failed, we haven't even failed at anywhere close to as hugely as the lady that invented the COVID vaccine, but still she tried and find another way. And that is very inspiring to think about, that most of what we do are the failures, but we figure out and we redo the experiment or figure out a new way through. And that's also very wonderful to hear just about all of these advances, all these things that we might have heard of every few and in real time when the news came in, right? About like, these treatments with HIV or this with cancer or this CRISPR technology, we might or like all these innovations with COVID, we might have heard these things spaced out over weeks or months, but to hear it all from you, like that whole list, it's amazing to think about as far as how far we've come. And so you've also mentioned though about how there's the medical science and technology and innovation, but there's also this need to go through the process, go through the red tape, or build a business and make it successful. And so, as far as you and your sort of medical serial entrepreneurialism, what do you have to share with us about the company that you built and what kind of just obstacles you had to come across when growing your company?
Well, I built FDA MAP, the CRO, the service provider, from scratch, from the ground up. And like any entrepreneur, it is challenging. It's hard. I started FDA MAP because I wanted to do things differently. I didn't want to become another run-of-the-mill. See, we are all scientists. I'm a scientist by training. I'm a PhD. I did my research for many years before I got into this area. And I'm always looking at, you can always improve everything. You can make it better. And my experience was that I can do better clinical research. I can reduce the chance of failure. I can make it more accessible. I can make it more available to people. So with those, high goals, I started this company, and I tried to put a culture of partnership. When you work on a trial, sometimes people look at contractors as if we have nothing in it. We have no emotional attachment to it. But we do feel when people fail. I mean, I'm a human being. When I see somebody working hard and not getting, I would feel bad about them. I know I'm not going to ignore that. And as I told you, I appreciate the hard work that goes into it. But there is a culture that in contracting world that I wanted to change. I wanted to make it more transparent. I wanted to make it more accountable. I wanted to make it more fair. It's a business, yes. Of course, we have bills to pay, and we need to also grow as a business. We have our investors who want returns on their investment and all that. So we need to do all of that. But we can do that while also doing a good job and also being fair to our customers. So, I struggle with that a lot because the norms are certain and you have to fight against the norms. And it is always challenging when you come out and try to do something different. Sometimes, first of all, people don't recognize it. It takes time for people to appreciate it. And second, you're always competing with a lot of other noise in the field. So I had, I built my company starting initially as a strategic advisor. Then I added regulatory advice, regulatory submissions. Then I added clinical trials. Then I added central labs. Then I added animal research. So now I do everything. Now you can come to me with an idea, and we will help you develop it all the way to market. But it took time, it took effort, and it took a lot of patience. Also building people around you. My team members, they're from the very first day, they are taught to think from the sponsor's point of view, think from the client point of view, put yourselves in their shoes. Think about this company is putting all this money and all this faith in this product. We need to make sure that we do a good job. We do a fair job. Science, we cannot make results, but at least we can do good research. So the results we get are reliable, are accurate. So we spend a lot of time building those resources. We build a lot of in-house resources. We build a lot of inexpensive resources. We trained a lot of people. I built a global company. I have now staff in other countries where I take advantage of remote work. I take advantage of different economies to the benefit of my clients. So, and I think and in the process, I also became part of many companies. I sit on many boards. I also invest in companies. So I've done other things that I'm happy about.
Wonderful. And so you solve these problems and then added on all these extra services and built your team to help you and just seeing where it leads you and how it fits into all these other things that you have going on. And how do you manage your time with all that? How do you avoid burning out, being overworked, or letting things slide with everything you have going on?
You need a work-life balance. Everybody does. So I do allocate time for my kids, my family. I give importance to everything. I think we are. I'm in a place where my work and life are integrated. So I could be doing a call with somebody while I'm on a vacation. Take a few minutes out and do a call so that they are not affected. But at the same time, I do go on vacations. I do go to my kids' school performances. I spend time with my wife. I do date nights. I do all those things that one needs to do. It's important to not get carried away. I think sometimes people forget that you need to have a balance in your life. You need to work. But I also give importance to my relationships and my families, and I encourage that in my people also. I encourage people taking a break. Something is bothering you, give to somebody else. Let somebody else deal with it. Sometimes we get stuck in places, so it's important to recognize. It's important to know what you don't know, so you can go to the right people and get the right advice, put the right people on it. Management is a skill. I've learned it the hard way. I think it's very important to respect the people who you work with, your employees, the people who report to you. Listen to them and improve, because anything can be improved. I strongly believe anything can be improved. So I do work at odd hours because I have young kids. So I want to talk to them in the evening. I want to take them to bed. But then I can stay up a little later in the night and finish up what I could not finish in the evening. I do that, and I think that's how I avoid getting burnt. And actually, I encourage that in all my employees. We do believe that people should be treated like adults. So I don't, for example, in my company, we don't have a 9 to 5 work schedule. We don't have a time when people come in and go. If somebody has a family crisis, they can leave anytime. Somebody's kid gets sick, they can go home and take care of them and catch up later, catch up some other time. As long as the work gets done, it should not matter whether they work 9 to 5 or they did it in the night or they did it on a weekend. It should not matter. I think they should be treated like adults, responsible adults. And that's
That's
what I do myself. That's my philosophy of life.
I love it. Those are some wonderful work principles and life principles. You're mentioning these ideas of having the balance, but also the integration where sometimes you might take that quick call, but also you have those clear boundaries set where you say, well, if I want to spend time in the evening with my kids, that means that in order to make up the productivity, I might work later in the evenings, but you have that sort of intentionality with your schedule. And then also there's an element you mentioned there of just keeping your ego in check and knowing that if you don't know what you don't know, if you don't know the answer, then you can go to others for help. And those are all wonderful things to think about. And so as we're kind of beginning to wind down our conversation here, Dr. Mukesh, is there any sort of misunderstanding or misconception people might have about medicine or about the FDA? Is there just some kind of misunderstanding that you see that you would like to clear up?
Oh, I think the biggest misunderstanding that is kind of ironic that people have a lot of misperceptions about clinical trials in general. I see a lot of people, because in media, very popular movies and very popular comedies where clinical trials are made fun of, and those carry a lot of weight. And there are a lot of misperceptions about how clinical trials are done. People think that they would get hurt when they participate in clinical trials. People think that clinical trials are like as if there's something unethical about them, or there's a perception about being used as an experiment, as a guinea pig. I heard that word a lot. And I would say those are all a lot of misperceptions. The way clinical trials are done these days, we are very highly controlled, very ethical, very aware of the risk that people are taking. So clinical trials offer an unmeasurable opportunity to a patient. Clinical trials offer you treatment that you cannot buy. Offer you state-of-the-art treatments. Many of these treatments, before they get tested in people, they have gone through decades of science, sometimes years of experimentation. So these are reliable treatments. These are good treatments that could offer people options. And also, the care that you get in clinical trials is very much different than what you would get otherwise. The amount of time a doctor will spend on you, the kind of tests that you will end up getting done on you, the kind of knowledge about your own body and your own health that you will get by being in clinical trials is unmeasurable. And people don't understand it, and people don't do that. So I tell people to educate themselves more about clinical research, and then participate. If you don't like something, object to it. Let us hear about it. Let's see what you would do different. If you don't find anything objectionable, then participate. Tell your friends who have, certain indications, certain diseases to explore clinical trials as an option for healthcare. I think that's what I would like people to go away with from this conversation. That clinical research people are dedicated scientists who are there because they believe this thing can treat somebody. We believe strongly that we are treating diseases, we're treating things that affect people. I get calls from patients many times who are desperate to find something for them. And I'm happy to direct them to clinical trials. I'm happy to direct them to newer options that could help them. So I would say people listening to this conversation should look at clinical trial differently. Look at it, I can tell you just one thing, take home message. In the last 10 years, there has not been even one death, one serious injury that can be attributed to clinical trials. Carelessness of people. Like people get hurt all the time. You can get side effects from the drugs you got prescribed to. But there has been not a single instance where somebody deliberately or intentionally or ignorantly hurt somebody in a clinical trial. And that is more than how many people got hurt by doctors in malpractice. So, that's something to be proud of. And I'm proud of that in my industry.
Very helpful. Well, thank you for helping us see clinical trials in a new light. And basically, the moral is don't believe everything that you see on TV and in comedies, because they're looking for the laugh, not necessarily for reality. And so, if somebody wants to take the next step with you, they want to find out more about what you have going on with FDA MAP. Where does someone go, and how does someone know if they are a right fit to speak with you?
Come to fdamap.com. Go to my website, FDA MAP. It's a very easy name to remember, FDA and MAP as Google Map, fdamap.com. So come to that and contact me, contact my staff. We'll talk to you. I think have a conversation. The first thing to do is to have a conversation. See, if you're a patient, want to know about clinical trials, I'm happy to take your call as well. If you're a company, if you are a doctor, if you are an entrepreneur, give me a call, get in touch, and we'll start the journey and we'll see where we go together.
Wonderful. Patient, doctor, company, or entrepreneur, go to fdamap.com and get that conversation started with Dr. Mukesh Kumar, because he is here to help you. I've been amazed just at the sort of the generosity that you've had here with being open and explaining to us some of these ideas, and also just some of these things you say about send someone on their way to where they need to go. And it seems like you're a problem solver and you love helping people. So I really admire that about you here in our conversation. And the very next step is for someone to go to fdamap.com. And thank you very much, Dr. Mukesh, for stopping by and sharing this wonderful information.
Thank you, Robert. It's a pleasure talking to you and sharing the things that I do every day. And I hope that we have another conversation sometime soon. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.